smarter to be on SportsGrid.
It is a special Monday following Selection Sunday, live right here in person in studio on the early line on SportsGrid. He is DRS, that is Donnie right side. I am Ben Stevens. Into our second hour up until 11 a.m. Eastern time. There is so much to get to around the 2024 NCAA Tournament, both in the men's and women's bracket. We will do a deep dive through the big dance in this second hour, and then hour 3 is pretty much all the college hoops that you need to know. Our guy JY, who was here with me yesterday on our Selection Sunday special, will be live in studio. But Donnie, it's not just the NCAA Tournament at this time of year. Home stretch of action in the association as we recapped in our opening hour. MLB coming our way on Wednesday in South Korea. It's the Dodgers and the Padres, just a week and a half away from true opening day around Major League Baseball. In NFL news this weekend, not long after we signed off the airwaves on Friday afternoon, did we get some big news for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have a new quarterback. We'll get to that in just a moment, but we are here into hour 2 on the early line.
And also keep in mind, people, it's been in the past, like Thursday starts the tournament, but that's since changed. Like we're here on a Monday, It gets going tomorrow night. Now, the one thing I do love to do as well, Ben, is you get the tournament bracket out of the way first. You don't look handicap it all the way through. You pick, and you let it settle and say, okay, that's the Picasso here. You started it. Now, how are you going to finish it the right way? So I got that in last night. We'll make some adjustments, but it's good stuff.
And we'll look at those round of 64 best bets, what we have in the first 4 in Dayton, Ohio, as well as we welcome in that SportsGrid radio audience here. Hour number 2 of a special edition of the Early Line live in studio together. Donnie's waving. I am here as well. But big NFL news this weekend, DRS. Justin Fields, finally on the move. A man that was speculated to go to many places, Pittsburgh being one of them. The return is the interesting thing here. Justin Fields traded from the Bears to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a 6th-round pick. Conditionally, it could become a 4th-rounder for the Bears franchise if Justin Fields plays 51% of the snaps in 2024. But just a 6th-rounder in return for Justin Fields. What did you make of the trade package or lack thereof that Chicago received?
My head's spinning a little bit here on this because, about let's just say a month ago when it was pretty apparent that the Bears were going to select number 1 overall, they weren't going to trade that pick. And as much as people say, hey, keep Fields and take that number 1 overall. No, you're not going to do that because no general manager will be able to survive Caleb Williams going to another franchise and winning 3 Super Bowls over a 10-year period, and the Chicago Bears would be still left out in the cold. That wasn't going to happen. Having said that, I thought there was a legitimate chance when we had a couple trade destinations saying, you know what, I don't think he's going to get a true number 1, but one of those, hey, we'll trade him to you for maybe a 2 and a 4. If he does play well, maybe that 2 and a 4 turns into a 1. But the trade market certainly dried up for the Chicago Bears, and I don't think they panicked. This is just the NFL being honest the same way we were, saying to ourselves, look, Justin Fields is going to have to be moved here, and other NFL teams know that. Therefore, you're not going to get a true number 1 pick or even a number 2 at that point once it looks like they're going to take Caleb Williams. Having said that, they trade him to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Ben, and I say to myself right away, oh, look at this. Russell Wilson's there with Justin Fields. May the best man win. And quite frankly, if I'm a Steelers fan or the Steelers organization, I want Justin Fields to win. He's much, much younger at this point, and maybe his ceiling at this point in his career is higher. And also, you have a free look-see. It doesn't cost that much money. And if he does play well, you have him under contract for that 5th year that you could invoke, which would be what, $25 million, which is a steal for a solid starting quarterback in the NFL. But yet we see him get traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Russell Wilson's there, which I understand with. You want to have a competition? I love that here. But yesterday, we see like, oh, no. That's not going to happen. It's going to be Russell Wilson, and Fields is going to back him up. So then my head starts spinning, Ben, once again.
Yeah, it is really interesting how Pittsburgh is going to make those determinations already. But when Russ signed with Pittsburgh just a week ago, there was a thought he would be in a quarterback competition alongside Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. Neither Pickett nor Rudolph still with the Steelers organization. We'll talk about Kenny Pickett's next destination in the city of brotherly love, staying in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in our next segment. But the focus here on Justin Fields. I have said time and again, I'm a believer in Justin Fields. I believe he can be a successful starting quarterback in the National Football League. But it seems as though he will be the backup to Russ. Is that a detriment to his career, learning under Russell Wilson? We shall see. But it is interesting as well when you look at the contract for Justin Fields. He will enter his 4th year in the NFL. He was the 11th overall pick in that opening round back in 2021. The Steelers have to determine this offseason, before 2024 begins, if they're going to pick up that 5th-year option on his rookie deal to keep him on those rookie contract numbers. If he's a backup, though, I don't assume they would do that, or you're really investing in your future beyond with thinking Russell Wilson is more of a stopgap, which I still believe he is. It is intriguing, though, that it was just a 6th-round pick back to Chicago. Conditionally can become a 4th-rounder, again, if Fields plays more than 50% of the snaps, 51% or greater to be exact. And you said that was the market, to which I agree, but Adam Schefter, who broke this news, and the ESPN NFL Insider did follow up by saying there were as many as 6 NFL organizations around the league interested in Justin Fields, but he and his representation vetoed all of that. He wanted to play in Pittsburgh, and Ryan Poles in the Bears front office did right by him.
Which, again, there's something to be said, because some people play this angle. Well, treat your players with respect, and you'll get that back in spades in the future when a future free agent wants to come to Chicago to remember that. No, they won't. They never remember that. You pay a player money. You can have the worst organization in football, Ben. You pay the guy enough money here, they're going to actually come to your situation. That's what I get upset with, because maybe you could have got a 3rd-rounder for, you know what, we're going to do right by him. You can't do that. It's a cold world in the NFL. Their contract is good anywhere in the league, and you're basically a general contractor at that point. Yeah. And the fact that he said he wanted to go to Pittsburgh, which would lead you to believe it's an open, where does he want to go? Just give me a chance to start. Great, trade me to Pittsburgh. Would love to be there, Ben. They go, you don't even have a chance to start. And they go, well, can I compete? No. He's 1, you're 2. So if he gets hurt or plays bad, you're in. That's not fair to Justin Fields. I don't think that's a great move overall for the Steelers, because you brought up the good point as well. You're taking a look here at, you have a free look, $1 or $2 million against the cap here for Russell Wilson, which if there was no backup quarterback, love it. See what Russ can do. But now you have another guy here to look see. So if Russ plays okay, you cut bait on Russ and you go, okay, your turn now. $25 million for a look see? Stop it. You can't do that.
And I think Russell Wilson actually elevates Pittsburgh based on their standard of success, 17 years under Mike Tomlin, never a losing season. Justin Fields might have that ceiling. And when you look at the odds, DRS, Pittsburgh has been on the move more than any other team in the AFC. And it was actually Fields that moved the Steelers' number more than Wilson. Now, plus 950 to win the division, 11-1 before the Justin Fields trade, 40-1 before Russ signed, $4 off that, 36-1. Take $5 off it at plus 3,100 to win the AFC. Still not a true conference contender in the gauntlet that is the AFC as a conference, but Justin Fields moved the market by $5. There should be optimism in a Mike Tomlin situation for a higher ceiling with Justin Fields. So the quarterback room in the Steel City is now Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Where'd Kenny Pickett go? Oh, to Philadelphia. We'll talk about it up next.
SportsGrid's going to have you covered for this NCAA tournament.
That's the movie that we know. When it's win or go home, they love to go home.
Tennessee's now in my phony club. They should all get together and drink green tea.
Furman's going to have it.
That is a team I'm betting on right now.
We are feeling this. You are feeling this at home. The excitement and the atmosphere.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in. This is
they're
the Penn
always
State
going to
rule.
be better than the West half.
Yep.
And that 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the book.
I bought into Tennessee with their veteran team. I really did. But that's, out the window. That ship has sailed today.
A team that wins no games in their conference tournament has never gone on to win the national championship. So you can put Tennessee in that boat. You can put Duke in that boat from last night. You can put Creighton in that boat from last night. They all lost their first conference tournament game.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats in fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the rim. All I've heard
you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart teams.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live. Prime time.
Back-to-back just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live. Overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and listen, watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
So the trade that we all expected at a certain point this offseason has now happened. The Pittsburgh Steelers acquire Justin Fields from the Chicago Bears. In return, the Bears get a 2025 sixth-round pick that can become a fourth-rounder if Fields plays 51% of the snaps for the Steelers next season. But all indications out of the Steel City is Russell Wilson is the guy, so Justin Fields get ready to hold the clipboard and learn behind Russ. But now that Chicago has made its final determination, they are holding on to that number 1 overall pick. And as we have always said, the caveat, DRS, it didn't need to be the Bears selecting first overall for Caleb Williams to cash a minus 2,000 ticket to be the first overall pick. But with Chicago holding on to 1, needing a quarterback, it's even clearer what they are going to do, and it has moved the market even more so. Caleb Williams, now a minus 5,000 favorite to be the first overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft.
Yeah, you're taking a look at the quarterback position here. We always thought Chicago was going to take Caleb Williams number 1, but you still had Fields there, and they were trying to play that, hey, we got an ace in our pocket. Let's say we don't know what we're going to do yet, but everybody outside just waiting for the, signature on the line. And that basically moving Justin Fields to Pittsburgh was that signature on the line. They're going to go number 1 overall and take their quarterback, which would be Caleb Williams, and certainly those odds reflect that here. And I think we can finally move on. We thought Chicago was going to do this. Now we know Chicago is going to do this.
The Bears have had a big week. They add Keenan Allen. They add DeAndre Swift. They make some other moves as well to bolster up the defense. Chicago plus 350 in what is going to be a competitive NFC North as things stand at the moment. Third place out of the 4 teams in that division. Detroit the favorite, Green Bay second, less than a buck behind. The Lions and the Minnesota Vikings round out the 4 teams in the NFC North. And again, even with a rookie quarterback in Caleb Williams, the expectation is not going to be, hey guys, let's go out there and compete 5, 6, maybe 7 wins. It's an above 500 record and playoff contention well into December. So the reason that Justin Fields maybe was in the market once again for the Pittsburgh Steelers was because of the first move of the weekend. The Steelers send Kenny Pickett to the Philadelphia Eagles. After they signed Russell Wilson, Kenny Pickett reportedly not all that pleased with that move. He wanted a fresh start. He stays in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but makes the trip from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia. He will be slotted in DRS as the backup QB for Jalen Hurts.
If the Eagles think they're going to do big things, they need a competent backup quarterback. And what that usually means is the guy's played some decent football over the past 2 seasons. And even if he didn't put up too many statistics, he's been in situations, felt the pressure, been in the huddle, and certainly wants to come to it if the Eagles need a victory, let's say week 12, because Jalen Hurts has a concussion at this point. But let's also be serious about the Pittsburgh Steelers. The one thing I can appreciate a little bit here, Ben, is the fact that if you think you don't have your quarterback of the future, don't play this out and say, well, he's under contract, and for 2 more years, we'll see what he has, and let's see if we can go 500. If you know, you know. Move on from it. So I do like that the Pittsburgh Steelers actually did that. But also, you're taking a look in the playoffs last year. Didn't we see everything coming down the line? If you're the franchise guy for a football team, let's just say, Kenny Pickett lost his throwing hand, Ben. He didn't even have a hand at this point. They go, you know what? We're going to design a game plan. We're going to hand off with the other hand, and we'll see how it goes because you're our franchise guy. They didn't let him start in that playoff game. Told you everything you needed to know, and then Russell Wilson came to town, and they started to say, well, you know what? We're going to battle it out, Kenny versus Russ, and very quickly it was they're not battling anything. So Kenny Pickett rightfully so goes, look, I don't care if I'm a backup somewhere else. I don't care if I'm even starting. I just have to get outside of Pittsburgh, and maybe Philadelphia's that clean start where you rehab him for a year or two. If you need him, he comes in, goes 2-1 in 3-game stretch, and away he goes with maybe a chance to be a starter for another organization next year. But the one thing we do know is Kenny Pickett was the odd man out in Pittsburgh right away, and it just surprised me that it even took this long to remove him from the equation.
So it's all a conversation and value and what is returned, right? Because we saw it for Justin Fields, the 11th overall pick in 2021, only a 6th rounder back. Kenny Pickett was the 20th overall pick, the only quarterback taken in the first round of the 2022 NFL draft. And both Pittsburgh and Chicago have decided to move on. Pickett will not be the starter in Philadelphia. Of course, that is Jalen Hurts. But as we saw one of the main storylines of a season ago in 2023 around the National Football League, Donnie, you need a reliable backup quarterback. Ergo, the Cincinnati Bengals, Los Angeles Chargers, significant injuries at the quarterback position that really held teams back out of playoff contention. But as soon as Mason Rudolph started on the road in Buffalo in favor of Kenny Pickett, that's how you knew his time in the Steel City was probably coming to a close. As we look at Kenny Pickett's 2 years in the National Football League, the numbers have not been all that outstanding. He has only thrown for over 300 yards once. It was in the first career start that he made in a 38-3 loss to Buffalo, 34 of 52 for 327 against the Bills. He has the same amount of touchdown passes, does Pickett, as interceptions, 13 TDs, 13 INTs. It'll be interesting to see what Kenny Pickett does, if anything, in Philadelphia. But again, if you are the Eagles and you are bolstering your roster once again to be a contender in the NFC, adding a reliable quarterback who still has some upside in Kenny Pickett is a smart move by Howie Roseman and the Birds front office.
Exactly. You can use that as an investment as well, because if you flip him for more than you actually traded him for, that's a win in your book, and you got hopefully some quality backup play. But also, you bring up a good point in today's NFL, which is so much different than when I was growing up in the 80s and early 90s. More of a statue in the pocket, which means if you got the concussion, were they really checking for it all that much, which they do now? And secondarily, if you have like a hamstring injury or a banged-up knee, it's not that big a deal if you're not a running quarterback. But in today's day and age, the Lamar Jacksons, the Jalen Hurts, the Josh Allens, if you're talking about a game where if you get a concussion, you're probably not playing the next week. That's massive to try to hold on. Or if you have a hamstring injury, you tweak it. You're down 3 weeks here. Give me a competent backup quarterback that can go 2-1, at least hold the fort until that quarterback comes back. So more than ever, you're seeing teams that think they can win a championship getting a good backup quarterback, because it's no longer, oh, we lost our quarterback. Well, granted, if you lose him for 9 weeks here, you're not going to make the playoffs anyway. Right. But 2 to 3 games a season, invaluable, Ben.
And that helped the Philadelphia Eagles when Gardner Minshew stepped in when they made that run to a Super Bowl 57, 2 seasons ago. There are 4 teams in the NFC in terms of those conference championship odds at a plus 750 number or shorter, including Philadelphia, plus 750. San Francisco, the favorites, at plus 240, less than half of even the Lions at a 6-1 number, and the Cowboys at plus 650. So now that free agency has really come and gone, still some names out there that can be signed to contracts. We also didn't talk about Aaron Donald, who retired after we were off the airwaves on Friday. 10 years, all with the Rams organization. First ballot Hall of Famer to Canton, Ohio, to say the least. 3-time Defensive Player of the Year in the National Football League. The next big event, DRS, is the 2024 NFL Draft. In just over a month, April 25th is that first round. 26th, day 2, that's rounds 2 and 3. The 27th is day number 3, rounds 4 through 7 in the Motor City. We showed you Caleb Williams, now a minus 5,000 favorite to go first overall to the Chicago Bears. Jaden Daniels, now a minus 155 favorite to be the second overall pick. That's swapped with Drake May. May is the favorite now in minus money, minus 135 to go third overall. The Commanders have the second overall selection, the Patriots the third. J.J. McCarthy, as we start to see some numbers move, is a quarterback in this draft cycle that is highly touted and highly regarded, despite what the numbers might tell you from his days in Ann Arbor. Minnesota is now an odds-on favorite. This market even moving on this Monday morning. It's minus 105 now for the Vikings to take J.J. McCarthy, despite Sam Darnold being in Minneapolis after Kirk Cousins goes to Atlanta. It looks as though the odds makers and the general consensus is, Donnie, Minnesota's next quarterback for the future is J.J. McCarthy.
And maybe even have to trade up to get him. Can't stick at 11 here. You get that extra ammunition with that second first-round pick, so you can jump into that maybe top 5, top 6, or maybe even top 3 to actually get J.J. McCarthy. We see this on a year-to-year basis. And also, maybe you didn't see it coming from the college football season because we're always about statistics here. But this guy won a national championship at Michigan, and everybody that talks about him, he's got the arm strength. If we needed him to throw for 350 yards a week, he could have done that. But for the betterment of the team, this is the way we had to move forward to win a national championship. Now, we'll see if everything is proved true and how high he goes, or these are smoke screens out here. But typically when the money moves, it's usually not a smoke screen here. There is a lot of love for J.J. going in that top 5 probably.
The Vikes currently have the 11th overall pick. The New York Giants draft 6th overall. The Chargers, Jim Harbaugh, J.J.'s former head coach at Michigan, have the 5th overall pick. There is a thought that Minnesota might have to move all the way up to number 5 overall to get J.J. It's plus 450 on the FanDuel Sportsbook. I bet it because I'm in New Jersey. NCAA Tournament breakdown next.
SportsGrid's going to have you covered for this NCAA tournament.
That's the movie that we know. When it's win or go home, they love to go home.
Tennessee's now in my phony club. They should all get together and drink green tea.
Furman's going to have a chance. That is a team I'm betting on right now.
We are feeling this. You are feeling this at home. The excitement and the atmosphere.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
Third,
this is the Penn State rule.
Be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
I bought into Tennessee with their veteran team. I really did. But that's, out the window. That ship has sailed today.
A team that wins no games in their conference tournament has never gone on to win the national championship. So you can put Tennessee in that boat. You can put Duke in that boat from last night. You can put Creighton in that boat from last night. They all lost their first conference tournament game.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats and fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the rim.
All I've heard you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart teams.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live, prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live, overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The moment you all have been waiting for on this Monday following Selection Sunday for the 2024 NCAA Tournament, the bracket breakdown. We go region by region. We look at the marquee matchups in the round of 64, the path to a Sweet 16, to the second weekend, to the Final Four, and of course, a national championship chase. So speaking of national titles, DRS, we start with the reigning national title winners, UConn, the number one overall seed in the 2024 field of 68. They are the top team in the East region. They are the favorites entering the big dance at a 4-1 number to win this year's rendition of the NCAA tournament, hoping to go back-to-back for the first time since Florida did so now over a decade and a half ago in 2006 and 2007. So we start with UConn at the top. They are favored to win the East region, but it is a gauntlet. There's the East region bracket. Happy to have it up there. UConn is the 1 seed. Iowa State is the 2. Illinois is the 3. Auburn is the 4. All 4 of those teams won their conference tournament. So you have the Big East, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the SEC tournament title winners all in the top 4 seeds in the East region. If UConn is going to go back-to-back, it's going to be a tough task.
It really is. And also, you're taking a look at UConn. Are they going to beat Stetson? Yes, they're going to beat Stetson. Game number 2, which they line up, FAU or Northwestern, be a heavy favorite. I don't see them having too much issues with either one of those ball clubs. But then you take a look in the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8. Let's just say it lines up the way I think it's going to line up. UConn's got to beat Auburn, then has to beat Iowa State before making it to the Final Four.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable to ask them to do that. And again, if they don't, it's no shame in their game, even though I do think UConn is the best team overall. But as we pointed out earlier, it's not a best of 3, a best of 5, a best of 7.
Yes.
It's one game. You don't bring your A game, the other team does, you can get beat. Case in point, did you watch the Big 12 final where you say, hey, I think Houston's a better basketball team than Iowa State? Not on that day they weren't. And that's what happens and why it's so hard to repeat at this point here. So for my money, and also keep in mind, we got a great poll coming up at the end of the hour,
yeah, we do,
which basically is going to contradict myself, and I can't help it here. UConn has a hard path to victory here, where I think they're the best team overall, but that doesn't mean you win the championship.
And listen, it is known as madness for a specific reason. It could be one night, whether it's the round of 32, whether it's the Sweet 16, Elite 8, or Final Four, that keeps UConn from its ultimate goal of going back-to-back as a national championship winner. However, they are booked as the favorites at 4-1. They are also the number 1 overall seed in this year's field of 68. Since the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee started designating who that top team in the tournament was back in 2014, only 3 1 seeds, number 1 overall, have won the national championship, despite 12 of the last 16 title winners being a number 1 seed. With that being said, last year UConn won it as a 4 seed, no 1, 2, or 3 seeds into the Final Four for the first time in history. So let's look at a 4-game sample size, maybe the marquee matchups in the East region in the round of 64. UConn, a 26.5-point favorite against the Hatters of Stetson in their opening matchup. A large number that is deserved. In 8-9, that game, whoever wins will more than likely take on UConn. It is FAU and Northwestern. San Diego State is the 5 seed. They will take on UAB, the champions of the American. So you look at UConn, FAU, and San Diego State, DRS, 3 of the 4 Final Four teams from last year in the top portion of this East region. And down to the bottom, Washington State into the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2008 takes on the champions of the Missouri Valley, the Drake Bulldogs. Currently, the Bulldogs a short 1.5-point underdog for a game that will be played in Omaha in the round of 64.
By the way, for me, you're taking a look at all these individual matchups in round number 1. The only one technically for me not so intriguing. I mean, Morehead State, Illinois, but also FAU. Even though it's at 8-9, it should be a competitive game. I'm not really intrigued by that one overall. It's moving forward. Like Washington State and Drake is such a good matchup in that round because I was looking at saying to myself, Washington State could be one of those teams where you watch in the Pac-12 and could be a legitimate team to cut down the nets in the conference tournament. Also may be able to do some damage here in the actual tournament itself. But also, Iowa State should get by South Dakota State. Like, even the round of 32 is unbelievable in this region across the board because BYU should be able to beat Duquesne. If they get their three-point shots rolling, they're a very good basketball team. And again, Illinois, something about them when Shannon came back, it was like, okay, if there's going to be a lost season, he comes back focused on just basketball activities. He's been absolutely wonderful. And if you want to win a championship, you need a superstar player that carries you through, which you saw him do in the Big Ten Conference Tournament. So I'm excited all the way through. But if you're UConn, I understand Hurley, and I love his mindset. You can line up every single number 1 seed against us all the way to the Final Four. We're going to have to beat him anyway to win a national championship. I respect that. But there's no way he really wakes up and sits by himself in the morning and goes, you got to be kidding me, man. We're trying to do something special in a back-to-back. Yes, I have the best team, but, man, the gauntlet I have to get through here in this Eastern bracket is tremendous.
That potential Sweet 16 matchup, by the way, in Boston between Auburn as the 4 seed and UConn as the 1 seed might be as good as any national championship game that you will see. The Tigers 12.5-point favorite in their opener against the champions of the Ivy in what an Ivy League tournament title game it was between Yale and Brown, with the Bulldogs winning at the very, very end. The buzzer, Mitch Noling, sends Yale into the NCAA tournament. When you look at Northwestern into the big dance for the second consecutive year, for the first time in program history, they have gone dancing 3 times in the last 7 years. They never went to the NCAA tournament in the first 111 years of their men's basketball program history. So many great games in the round of 64 out in the East region. Iowa State, the 2 seed, by the way, 16.5-point favorite against the Summit League title winners in South Dakota State. Now we go from the East to the South, where the number 2 1 seed, the second number 1 seed in terms of the overall seed list resides. That would be Houston. They're the top team in the South region. Houston will open as a 23.5-point favorite against the champions of the SoCon. That would be Longwood. After the Cougs got demolished in the Big 12 title game, good luck to Longwood. It's going to be a very tough night against Houston. Wisconsin and James Madison, that will be a 12-5 spot DRS many people look at in terms of a key matchup there. Duke has had a weird last 3 weeks. They're in the 4-13 game against Vermont. The Blue Devils an 11.5-point favorite. And NC State, after winning 5 straight in D.C. in the ACC tournament to steal one of those bids and earn an automatic berth, takes on Texas Tech in their round of 64 matchup.
That's the crazy one for me, that game where NC State wins 5 games in 5 nights against UNC, which burned a plus 160 for me ticket on them to win the actual conference, and also had another moneyline parlay on that day, which I thought the easiest anchor of that leg was going to be, obviously, North Carolina going up against NC State, and that didn't happen. But let's look at the top here. You know me. I've been saying it all along, and maybe I'll be wrong in the tournament. I'm not high on the ACC here. So if I'm looking at NC State, I'm going to give the tip of the cap here to Texas Tech, but also Duke and Vermont. Duke's going to win that game. But JMU, a legitimate chance for me here. Again, just filling out that early bracket and getting a feel for it. JMU over Wisconsin, JMU over Duke. I would not be surprised at that point. Now, granted, then they're going to come up against Houston. But back to your point on the number 1 overseed Houston, who I think has a great chance to win a national championship, but let's just say at least get to the Final Four and participate and have a legitimate shot at it. Do you like the fact that they actually lost that game and lost it so big? I kind of do here. Because some people will say to themselves, Ben, you know what? That's a bad sign of what's to come. You're going to play teams with upper competition. They don't have it here. Sometimes the coach sits back and goes, you know what? We're still on the 1 line, but now I can sit in my room, and I'm going to meet them on the court on Monday and let them have it, and they'll listen to me because, like, hey, guys, you want your season to end? Do what you did on Sunday here or Saturday here. It's going to end quickly. I like it.
Kelvin Sampson is an intense coach. They defend the crap out of the basketball. They're the second best defensive team in the country. They lost in the Big 10 title game, or Big 12 title game, rather, against the best defensive team in the country. That is Iowa State. Houston is going to be ready to go. A 23.5-point spread is a large number, even for a 1 seed to cover against Longwood. But I would maybe look at the Cougs even covering that 23.5-point spread or keeping Longwood under its team total. Vermont into the NCAA tournament for the 5th time in the last 7 seasons. They have the 62nd best defense in the country. They play with one of the 15 slowest tempos in the country. They could frustrate Duke to at least stay within that number. Now, JMU was a 4.5-point dog last night. In the overnight hours, there is a market buyback on Wisconsin. And Wisconsin, of course, getting to the Big Ten tournament title game. They had a terrible month of February, starting to find better basketball. The Badgers were a top 10 team throughout this college basketball season. Now starting to play like that once again with one of the best stars and scorers in the Big Ten in A.J. Storr. But can we take a moment for that 8-9 matchup? Nebraska and A&M. It's a 1.5-point spread in favor of the Cornhuskers. Last week, Trev Alberts, who was the athletic director at Nebraska, his alma mater, he was an All-American linebacker under Tom Osborne in the early 1990s, had been in Lincoln since 2021, and out of nowhere on Wednesday, accepted the open athletic director job in College Station at A&M. Nebraska in the 8-9 game in the South region in the men's tournament will take on Texas A&M. In the women's NCAA tournament in the 6-11 matchup in the Albany 1 region, it is also Nebraska and A&M, DRS.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're saying, even in the women's bracket here, we couldn't just pick the number 1 seeds that we wanted to here, because it looks like the NCAA is like, let's get the people what they want. Let's get a regional rivalry going on here between Nebraska and Texas A&M, and they were able to do that here. But getting back to that Nebraska-Texas A&M game, it's a true coin flip to me, too. I actually, in my early bracket, did pick Nebraska to advance to play Houston, so I'll stick with that right now. But again, the good part about it is you pick the games on Sunday night immediately when they happen. I let them sink in on a Monday and say, Donnie, I know you want to get down on some of these futures wagers, which I do, and I have teams picked out right now. But I just like that to simmer on the pot here, Ben. Give me Monday, give me Tuesday, give me Wednesday, maybe even on Thursday morning before I pull the trigger on who exactly I like here. I love it. I love the wait and the slow burn right now. Make sure we get it right.
Yeah, when you look at A&M, by the way, they lost 5 straight games in the middle of February, responded by winning their final 3 games of the regular season in March, upset Kentucky in the SEC tournament, but do have 14 losses, along with Michigan State, the at-large teams with 14 losses the most in this NCAA tournament field. The Cornhuskers looking for their first ever win as a program in NCAA tournament history. Of course, give me Nebraska. JMU is going to be a team as that 12 spot that many look to over the 5. 35% of the 5-12 games since the field expanded in 1985. The 12 is pulled the upset. More around the NCAA tournament next.
SportsGrid's going to have you covered for this NCAA tournament.
That's the movie that we know. When it's win or go home, they love to go home.
Tennessee's now in my phony club. They should all get together and drink green tea.
Furman's going to have a chance. That is a team I'm betting on right now.
We are feeling this. You are feeling this at home. The excitement and the atmosphere.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
This
is the Penn State
rule. Be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the book.
I bought into Tennessee with their veteran team. I really did. But that's, out the window. That ship has sailed today.
A team that wins no games in their conference tournament has never gone on to win the national championship. So you can put Tennessee in that boat. You can put Duke in that boat from last night. You can put Creighton in that boat from last night. They all lost their first conference tournament game.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats in fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the rim.
All I've heard you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live, all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart teams.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live, prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live, overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and listen, watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The East to the South, now the Midwest to the West. We're the 1 seed in the Midwest region for the 2024 men's NCAA tournament is Purdue. You can win a Big Ten title outright in the regular season for a second consecutive year. But for the Boilermakers, their season ultimately will be defined by what they do over the next 3 weeks here in March, and hopefully for Purdue and the Boilermakers into early April. The 1 seed in the Midwest region, Purdue will open up against the winner of Montana State and Grambling in the first 4 in Dayton on Wednesday evening. Elsewhere, the 2 seed in the Midwest region is Tennessee. So, DRS, when you look at the Midwest and you look at the path for Purdue, they will be a story to follow in the NCAA tournament after getting bounced as a 1 seed last year by a 16 seed Fairleigh Dickinson. How do you think the path lays out for the Boilers?
I think it lays out very well. And also, it's one of those paths, Ben. We're talking about Purdue as being a frontline team, and rightfully so. They're a really good basketball team. But the jitters for Purdue aren't going to come, Ben, in the Sweet 16. They're not going to come in the Final Four if they make it, or even the championship game. It's those first 2 games here where you're expecting them to trip and fall because they've done that in the past. You take a look at game number 1. Should win it going away. Game number 2, if it lines up TCU, Utah State, you should be able to handle your business there, Ben. You're not saying, oh, my goodness, we got one of those misseeded teams or mislined teams at 8 and 9 that we're going to have to deal with. Like, throw a Kentucky like the 8 seed. Like, come on, man. We're just set up to fail at this point. You should be able to have smooth sailing to the Sweet 16. For my money, is probably going to be a team like Gonzaga, which you should beat also here. I like the matchups for Purdue because the trouble comes game number 1, game number 2. I don't think they have any troubles this year. I think they cruise into the Sweet 16, and then they could take that deep breath and say, look, our failures have been before this. We're here now. We're past that. Let's go out and win a championship.
So that game on Wednesday, Montana State, the Bobcats, the champions of the Big Sky, who are actually been in the tournament for 3 consecutive years, but this year was not the year they were expected to be there. 17-17 in the regular season, made a run in the Big Sky tournament, upset their in-state rivals, the Grizz of Montana, in that championship game. 3.5-point spread in favor of Montana State against Grambling. Purdue just very happy neither of those 2 teams are from New Jersey. The 2 seed is Tennessee. They open up against that team in New Jersey that upset the Boilermakers in the Sweet 16 2 years ago. That would be St. Peter's. Line open at 19.5, now 20 to hook in favor of the Volunteers, who have their own issues in terms of winning in March. A couple of intriguing games you will keep your eye on here. The 12-5 matchup. McNeese versus Gonzaga. Will Wade, the bag man, the head coach of McNeese. They're a 6.5-point dog against the Zags. Gonzaga into the big dance for the 25th consecutive season, but McNeese won 30 games this year, DRS. And Kansas as the 4 seed, taking on the 13 seed Samford, a team that can get out there and run and score a ton of points. KU enters the NCAA tournament consecutively for a 34th straight year, but this year the first time under Bill Self with double-digit losses, and despite being a 4 seed, their 2 best players, Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullough Jr., dealing with injuries, both missed the Big 12 tournament last week in KC.
That's the tough part right now because we're not privy to that exact information on who's going to play and who's going to be effective if they do play. But let's just say right now, you're getting any bit of what you saw Kansas without their 2 top players. Not many teams are going to not say, we want to line up against Kansas. Absolutely, they're going to want to line up against Kansas, which makes it so interesting here for a Cinderella run. Typically, let's just say it's Gonzaga and it's McNeese. And let's just say McNeese does pull off that mild upset here in round number 1. Then you say, oh, well, they're going to have to go up against Kansas. Good luck with that. But this isn't a Kansas team that we even expect most people to get to that and be a team that's going to do damage after the round of 32, and rightfully so. So if McNeese can get by Gonzaga here, I think they get by Kansas, which slingshots them right into moving forward, which would be so much fun to watch it play out. But having said that here, let's settle down because I think Gonzaga is built for this. I don't think Gonzaga is going to trip here. Gonzaga is not going to overlook an opponent like McNeese State. They could be that fun team here if they can get by Gonzaga because, quite frankly, I'm not a believer in Kansas, whether or not, Ben, they have their full starting 5 intact here.
Yeah, and Samford can put up some points. We know that to be the case. McNeese ran through the Southland tournament. I bet them at minus 430 to win the tournament title just because they were a 14.5-point favorite in the semifinals, 16.5 in that tournament title game. 30 wins for McNeese. Only 2 other teams in this field, UConn and James Madison, each with 31, have more than the Cowboys entering the big dance. For KU, injuries will be a huge part of the conversation. And you saw the 8-9 matchup there. Utah State, one of the 6 teams out of the Mountain West. They were the regular season title winners in the Mountain West Conference. They're actually, despite being the 8th seed, a 2.5-point dog against TCU, who is the 9 seed. So don't call it an upset if TCU wins outright.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just giving the benefit of the doubt in that one to the better conference for me, Ben. I think the Big 12 overall is probably the deepest for me from top to bottom. Again, rivaling the SEC, and that's why they got so many teams placed in this tournament. But I'm going to trust TCU in the spot as that team to move forward and then take on Purdue. And again, I do think Purdue will be able to handle their business, whether it's Utah State and or TCU in round number 2 there.
Texas is the 7th seed in the Midwest region. They await the winner of one of those first 4 games, the second first 4 game tomorrow night in Dayton between the 10 seeds, Colorado State and Virginia. I like Colorado State, who's now booked as a slight favorite, minus 137. Total is 120.5. That minus 137, the money line price. And in the 11 of 12 years we've had the first 4 format to begin the big dance, we have seen a team that wins in the first 4 also win at least 1 game in the round of 64. I think Colorado State could be that team to not only get past UVA, but also knock off Texas in the round of 64. Quickly before we go to the West region, Oregon, the 11th seed in the Midwest. Of course, it was the Ducks that won the Pac-12 tournament when they were not expected to. Dana Altman, for the 3rd time in the past 11 years, when Oregon wasn't really in the running for an at-large berth on the bubble, they win the Pac-12 tournament to get into the big dance. The Ducks will take on South Carolina, a surprising team in the SEC, but not one the metrics or the odds makers often look at with the most optimistic view.
No, and sometimes you're just going to take a look at this seed line and say, okay, well, South Carolina's the 6th seed, Oregon, even though they won the conference tournament's the 11th seed, but rightfully so. The SEC was a very deep conference, and I didn't have a lot of belief here throughout the regular season of the Pac-12, quite frankly, even the Pac-12 tournament. But having said that, Oregon's a team that could probably move forward and pick up a victory against South Carolina. Again, just doing this quickly here, I did pick Oregon on that line to advance and play Creighton here in round number 2.
When you look at South Carolina, they were a great cover team this year. They are one of the best power conference cover teams in the country. 13 covers in SEC play out of their 14 total SEC wins, including conference tournament action. 12 of those 13 covers, DRS, as an underdog, only 1 as a favorite. They are booked as a slight favorite in this game at the moment. Creighton, the 3 seed in the Midwest, a 12.5-point favorite in their opener against Akron. John Gross and the Zips winning the MAC tournament title game in unreal fashion. They were playing Kent State, who won the tournament a year ago. Kent State made a bucket in the final 5 seconds. Your heart breaks for the young man for the Golden Flashes, who didn't recognize the situation. Fouled Akron. The Zips won at the charity stripe. Creighton trying to get to the Final Four for the first time in program history as well. Now we get to the 4th region we have yet to discuss. That would be the West. It feels like the one that is most up in the air, maybe not the strongest of all 4 portions of this 2024 NCAA tournament bracket. And again, North Carolina is the 1 seed, but Arizona The 2 seed is favored to reach the Final Four, the champions of the West region, and they have the shorter price to win a national title as well.
Yeah, we're taking a look here. Look, again, I'm getting back to the ACC. I thought Carolina was the best of the bunch here, no doubt about it, in that conference throughout the regular season and the ACC tournament, which they did not win here. So if I'm looking at NC State, I do think they have a nice draw. But having said that, St. Mary's, I think, has a pretty good draw here to do some damage as a 5 seed. But also at the bottom of that bracket, you're taking a look at Baylor. I've loved Baylor all season long, and now you're taking a look at Baylor to beat Colgate, who's a solid team coming out here. But I think they handle their business. I think they're better than Clemson and or New Mexico, whoever they play in that round. And I think Baylor is a very good matchup here for Arizona. So I have that number 3 seed moving quite a bit here, even in that Elite 8, taking on North Carolina for the right to go to that Final Four. So the bottom of the bracket, I think, is advantageous for Baylor. But I don't like Arizona. But I think it's a great draw for Arizona. And they're ultra talented. If they get it rolling, they can do some damage as well. This is one of those seed lines here that I'm looking at. From the 1 and the 2, I think both favorable for UNC and also Arizona.
Right now, Arizona, the favorites to win the West region. You win a region, you get to the Final Four. That would be in Phoenix, by the way, for the Cats. Talk about some home floor advantages on what is supposed to be a neutral site, plus 260. Less than a buck behind, though, is UNC at a plus 350 number. Baylor, the 3 seed, tied for the third best price alongside Alabama at plus 650. Is Alabama going to get out of the round of 64 against the College of Charleston, the Cougs, the champions of the CAA? I am not so sure. We are going to see a lot of points in that game. In fact, the over-under right now, DRS, for the Cougars and the Crimson Tide is 172.5. It is the highest over-under for a round of 64 game in the Big Dance that we have seen in nearly 2 decades. And it is a very, very lofty number. Some of those other marquee matchups in the West region. Mississippi State will take on Michigan State. Chris Jans has the Bulldogs dancing once again. So does Tom Izzo for a 26th consecutive season. Mississippi State, the slight underdog despite being the 8th seed against MSU. That would be the Spartans, minus 120 on the money line. You mentioned St. Mary's. Tough matchup in their opener against Grand Canyon, a GCU team, DRS, that has won 29 games this year. The Gales, though, the champions of the WCC, knocking off Gonzaga in that tournament title game. How do you break down that intriguing round of 64 5-12 matchup out west?
I love it. Because I'm a real big fan of St. Mary's this year. And even though they, coming back in that final game, they took that loss. I even told you that Gonzaga was going to win the WCC conference tournament, and they didn't win there because why? St. Mary's was the better team overall. So now I see that slingshot appearance. I think they get by Grand Canyon, and I think they're a great matchup against Alabama because the one team, if you look at Alabama, if everything's going right and they dictate tempo, Alabama's going to beat St. Mary's. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's St. Mary's dictating tempo against Alabama. And the one thing you can do with a team that loves the three-point shot and absolutely loves the run is frustrate them. If the shots aren't going down, they're going to rush those shots faster and faster. And I think it's a good spot here for St. Mary's. St. Mary's to go on a run. I think they take on North Carolina. Maybe that end runs there, but boy, oh boy, I think St. Mary's at least 2 games under their belt in the NCAA tournament. I think it's a possibility.
5.5-point spread in favor of the Gales against a really good Grand Canyon team. Again, they rank top 65 in the adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency numbers according to KenPom. Really good numbers for the champions of the WAC. That total 131.5. Again, Alabama and Charleston, that's 172.5. The complete opposite end of the spectrum. Alabama this year, 32 games overall. Over in 24 of the 32. And how about Arizona's opening round matchup against Long Beach State? They are going to be a team that is detailed here in this week. The Cats, a 19.5-point favorite against Long Beach State, total 161.5. Long Beach State was not expected to win the Big West. That was UC Irvine. They were nearly a $2 odds-on favorite to win the Big West tournament and to appear in the NCAA tournament. Long Beach State, before the conference tournament got underway last week, let go of their head coach, Dan Munson, who had been there for 17 seasons. But then Munson and the boys got hot. They win the Big West. They take that automatic berth now into the Big Dance.
Like, they couldn't wait a couple days. I mean, what was the big rush at that point? I mean, my goodness. But Arizona, this reminds me of my childhood growing up in the 80s and early 90s when the number 1 seeds and number 2 seeds absolutely Hulk smashed their opponent. Arizona's going to be angry from the way that Pac-12 tournament turned out and from guys like me telling them they can't win anything, so why even show up to the tournament? They're going to smash Long Beach State in round number 1. And I do think they line up against Nevada in round number 2. They should win that. And then that tough matchup against Baylor there in the Sweet 16, I think is a good one. I think Baylor has a good chance in that one.
I also look at New Mexico, the champions of the Mountain West, who the committee told us last night, had they not won the conference tournament, would not have been into the NCAA tournament. I think that's a bunch of malarkey. 22nd in the net. The Lobos under Richard Pitino might be able to make a run. Since 2013, the last 10 NCAA tournaments, we have seen a seed 5 or lower into the Final Four each and every year. We hear from you about the bracket next.
SportsGrid's going to have you covered for this NCAA tournament.
That's the movie that we know. When it's win or go home, they love to go home.
Tennessee's now in my phony club. They should all get together and drink green tea.
Furman's going to have a chance. That is a team I'm betting on right now.
We are feeling this. You are feeling this at home. The excitement and the atmosphere.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like
This
is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to
Penn
find
State's
a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
Third,
this is
they're
the Penn
always
State
going to
rule.
be better than the West half.
Yep.
And that 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
I bought into Tennessee with their veteran team. I really did. But that's, out the window. That ship has sailed today.
A team that wins no games in their conference tournament has never gone on to win the national championship. So you can put Tennessee in that boat. You can put Duke in that boat from last night. You can put Creighton in that boat from last night. They all lost their first conference tournament game.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats in fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the
All
rim.
I've heard you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live, all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart teams.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live, prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live, overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Closing out this second hour, live right here on a Monday on the early line on SportsGrid. He is Donnie right side. I am Ben Stevens. It's a special Monday. We're live in person, in studio together, but we do the same thing to round out hour number 2. The bracket has been revealed for the 2024 Men's NCAA Tournament, so we need to hear from you. Which number 1 seed in the field of 68 is going to go home first? That was the question in Fade the Public. At SportsGrid TV on Twitter, that was the question. Which number 1 seed will exit the NCAA tournament before the rest? You have 4 options to choose from. It would be UConn, Houston, Purdue, and North Carolina. And unsurprisingly, I think before we even released this poll, DRS, we knew who the winner, or the loser, I guess, in this case would be. the Boilermakers at more than 55%.
It's pretty easy to call that one. North Carolina, 25%, Houston, 14%, and then UConn, 5.7%. But let's just start with the top here in Purdue. They've given you every right to doubt them here, and understandably. But again, as handicappers, you're trying to line up things that make sense and say, all right, is this a different version of Purdue? What's the pathway to victory? Because it's the same reason why, let's just say 2 weeks ago, if I said, Ben, I love Purdue to win this thing, I'm just going to bet them now. Like, come on, man, you might wind up with a UConn-esque bracket here, and then we're all going to laugh at Purdue. But there's no reason to believe at 55% or so here that Purdue should get knocked out first. I like the seed that they have, and I don't think the public's right here.
I don't believe the public is right either. I actually think, because we did this last night on the Selection Sunday special, that Connecticut, despite being the reigning national champs, with how much of a gauntlet the East region is the team most likely to get bounced from the NCAA tournament first. North Carolina could be an objective choice there as well. But Purdue is right on track. We've only seen 2 1 seeds bounced by a 16 seed in the history of the NCAA tournament. Virginia in 2018, Purdue a season ago. What did UVA do in 2019? They won a national championship. What is Purdue going to do this year? In my estimation, they're going to win a national championship.
Whoa.
We'll start hour 3 here in less than a minute, live on the Early Line.